When I woke up from a 6-day medically induced coma, the first thing I asked the nurse was where my kids were. She looked at me with pity and said, "Your sister picked them up 4 days ago." She brought temporary custody papers, but when I rushed home to get my children, the locks had been changed, and my sister was standing on my porch holding a police report, calling me an intruder. My name is Stephanie Peterson. I'm 32 years old, an administrative assistant, and until that week, I believed the worst thing my sister could do was resent me. I was wrong. Chloe didn't just want my life. She had already started taking it apart, one signature at a time. 6 days earlier, I had been standing in the break room at work, eating leftover pasta from a plastic container. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I remember checking the clock because I needed to leave by 5:15 to collect Bobby and Sasha from their after-school program. Bobby was 7 and had recently decided he wanted to become a marine biologist. Sasha was 5 and changed her future career every 3 days. That week, she planned to become a veterinarian, a ballerina, and the mayor. I took 3 bites of the pasta, then my throat began to tighten. At first, I thought I had swallowed too quickly. I drank water. It didn't help. My skin started burning. My lips went numb. The room tilted beneath me. I had a severe cashew allergy. Everyone close to me knew it, especially Chloe. A coworker found my emergency injector in my handbag and called an ambulance, but by the time the paramedics arrived, my blood pressure had crashed. I stopped breathing once on the way to the hospital, then again in the emergency room. The doctors stabilized me, but swelling around my airway and complications from oxygen loss forced them to place me in a medically induced coma. For 6 days, I knew nothing. I didn't know Chloe had arrived at the hospital less than 2 hours after I was admitted. I didn't know my ex-husband, Robert, had arrived 20 minutes after her. And I didn't know that while machines were breathing for me, they were filing documents that described me as unstable, irresponsible, and possibly addicted to prescription medication. When I opened my eyes, the world came back in pieces. A bright ceiling, a dry mouth, a machine pulsing beside me, then the crushing awareness that I didn't know where my children were. The nurse told me Chloe had collected them from their after-school program 4 days earlier. She said she was your authorized guardian, the nurse explained carefully. She had documents. What documents? Temporary guardianship paperwork and a medical power of attorney. I never signed a medical power of attorney. The nurse's expression changed, only slightly, but I saw it. She looked towards the door before lowering her voice. Your sister instructed the hospital not to release information about your condition to anyone except her. My heart monitor began beeping faster. Did she visit me? Once. Did she bring Bobby and Sasha? No. I asked for my phone. It wasn't in my belongings, neither was my handbag. According to the inventory sheet, Chloe had signed for both. The nurse helped me call her from the hospital telephone. Chloe answered on the 4th ring. Stephanie? Her voice sounded soft, almost frightened. For one foolish second, I felt relieved. Where are my children? There was a pause, then her tone changed. Bobby and Sasha are safe. I didn't ask whether they were safe. I asked where they were. They're with me. Bring them to the hospital. That isn't a good idea. I tried to sit up, but pain pulled through my chest. Chloe, I am their mother, and you nearly died because you were careless. I had an allergic reaction. That's not what the doctors think. I looked at the nurse. She shook her head immediately. What are you talking about? You need to focus on recovering, Chloe said. The children need stability. Then she hung up. My doctor advised me to remain in the hospital for at least another 24 hours. I discharged myself 3 hours later. It wasn't sensible. But neither was lying in a hospital bed while my sister decided whether I was allowed to speak to my own children. A coworker named Denise collected me. She brought clean clothes, a pair of shoes, and the emergency cash from the locked drawer in my desk. On the drive home, she kept glancing at me. You're sure you want to do this today? I'm going to collect my kids. What if Chloe refuses? She can't refuse. I still believed that. I believed there had been a misunderstanding. I believed Chloe had panicked, taken temporary control, and become overprotective. That belief lasted until we turned onto my street. My car was gone. Robert's black pickup truck was parked in my driveway, and the brass key I had carried for 7 years no longer fit my front door. I tried it twice. Then I knocked. Chloe opened the door wearing one of my cardigans. Behind her, I could see framed photographs missing from the hallway wall. A new security camera had been installed above the entrance. "What did you do to my locks? You're not supposed to be here. This is my house. Not while the guardianship order is active." I stepped towards the doorway. She moved backwards and raised her phone. "Don't come inside. Where are Bobby and Sasha? They're staying somewhere safe." "Safe from whom?" She looked directly at me. "From you." A police cruiser arrived less than 5 minutes later. Chloe had called before I reached the house. She handed the officer a folder. Inside was an emergency temporary guardianship order granting her control over my children until a hearing scheduled 2 days later. There was also a copy of a police report accusing me of attempted unlawful entry and threatening behavior. The officer read the paperwork, then looked at me with an uncomfortable expression. "Ma'am, I understand this is your property, but there appears to be a valid court order involving the children. She changed my locks. That may be a civil issue. She stole my children. The order says she has temporary guardianship. I was unconscious when it was filed." He lowered his voice. "Then you need an attorney immediately." Chloe stood behind him with her arms folded. I had seen that expression throughout my childhood. It was the face she made whenever she had taken something from me and wanted to watch me realize I couldn't get it back. I didn't argue with the officer. I didn't give Chloe another dramatic scene to describe in court. I asked Denise to drive me away. That decision probably saved my children, because Chloe's first plan depended on making me appear unstable. I refused to help her. Denise took me to the office of a family lawyer named Marcus Hale. He agreed to meet us after hearing that my custody hearing was less than 48 hours away. Marcus read the guardianship petition in silence. Then he removed his glasses. "This application claims you have a history of substance abuse, erratic behavior, and untreated mental illness. None of that is true. It also says your sister has been the children's primary caregiver for several months. She watches them occasionally. There are signed statements from your ex-husband and 2 other witnesses. Robert lost his parental rights." Marcus nodded. "I saw that. Robert had lost visitation rights 3 years earlier after leaving Bobby and Sasha alone in a motel room while he disappeared for nearly 8 hours. The police found him intoxicated in a casino car park. After that, he refused counseling, missed hearings, and eventually stopped contacting the children, or so I believed." Marcus tapped the guardianship papers. "The good news is that you're awake, coherent, and medically stable. Temporary guardianships are not meant to replace a competent parent merely because that parent experienced a medical emergency. So we can end this. We should be able to." For the first time since waking, I felt something close to hope. Then Marcus mentioned his retainer. I opened my banking app on Denise's phone. My password didn't work. I called the bank. After 40 minutes of identity verification, a representative informed me that my primary current account had been restricted under a power of attorney. My savings account contained $19. 6 days earlier, it had contained more than $23,000. "Who transferred the money?" I asked. "I'm not authorized to disclose transaction details while the power of attorney remains active." "I'm Stephanie Peterson." "Yes, ma'am. It's my money." "I understand. But our system lists Chloe Michaels as your financial agent." Marcus held out his hand for the phone. "This is Attorney Marcus Hale. Please place an immediate fraud alert on every account and preserve all transaction records." The representative agreed to open an investigation. But my money was still gone. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Who knew enough about your finances to do this?" "Chloe. Who had access to your signature? She's been inside my house hundreds of times." "Who knew you would be unconscious long enough to file the guardianship?" I looked at him. "Are you suggesting she knew what was going to happen?" "I'm suggesting that most people don't prepare a guardianship petition. Medical power of attorney and financial power of attorney in less than 48 hours unless they have help." That was when I stopped viewing Chloe's actions as opportunistic. She hadn't seen an emergency and taken advantage of it. She had been prepared for it. Marcus agreed to represent me on an emergency basis and defer part of his fee. He instructed me to obtain my complete medical records, contact the hospital's patient advocate, and report the financial documents as fraudulent. Before Denise drove me back to her house, I bought a new phone. There were 47 unread messages waiting in my cloud account. The earliest were from coworkers asking whether I was alive. Then there were messages from neighbors. One had seen Chloe removing boxes from my house. Another had watched Robert carry a small safe into his truck. The final message came from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "My name is Alina. I'm a nurse at St. Matthew's. I was working the night you were admitted. I think you need to know what happened in the lobby." I called immediately. Alina answered in a whisper. She explained that she had seen Chloe speaking with Robert near the emergency department entrance. At the time, she assumed he was a concerned relative. Later, Chloe told hospital staff that Robert was dangerous and should not receive information about me. "That didn't make sense," Alina said. "They arrived together. Can you prove that? There are cameras in the lobby. Will the hospital release the footage? Not without a subpoena." "But I documented what I saw in an internal incident report after your sister tried to remove part of your medical file." My hand tightened around the phone. "She did what?" She asked for the original emergency intake paperwork. When records staff refused, she became angry. "What was on it?" "The paramedics noted that your food container smelled strongly of nut oil." I closed my eyes. The pasta had come from my refrigerator, but I hadn't made it. Chloe had brought it to my house the previous evening. She said she had made too much and didn't want it wasted. When I reminded her about my allergy, she rolled her eyes and said she had used no nuts. I had eaten dinner with the children that night, but the leftovers were mine alone. Chloe had insisted the dish was too spicy for Bobby and Sasha. I told Alina everything. She became quiet. "Stephanie, you need to contact the police." I did. A detective took my statement but warned me that suspicion was not proof. The food container had disappeared from the office refrigerator after my collapse. No sample remained to test. That should have protected Chloe, but Chloe had always been careless when she believed she was smarter than everyone else. Marcus began searching public records that evening. At nearly midnight, he called. "Your sister is married." "I know. She divorced Michael 2 years ago." "No. She remarried 6 months ago." I sat upright on Denise's sofa. "To whom?" Marcus sent me the marriage record. Chloe Michaels had married Robert Peterson in a courthouse ceremony across the state line. My sister had married my ex-husband. They had concealed it for 6 months. And suddenly, every strange detail of the past year changed shape. Chloe asking whether Robert still had parental rights. Chloe offering to organize my filing cabinet. Chloe volunteering to collect the children. Chloe repeatedly asking whether my father had left money for Bobby and Sasha. My father died 4 years earlier. He left each child a trust. Together, the funds were worth a little more than $500,000. I was trustee while the children were minors, but my father had included an unusual clause. If I died or permanently lost custody, control passed to the children's legally appointed guardian. At the time, the clause seemed practical. Now it looked like a target. Marcus searched the financial disclosures attached to the guardianship petition. Chloe had requested authority over educational, medical, and financial decisions, including the children's trusts. There it was. The reason she wanted my children. Not love, not concern, access. The next morning, the bank's fraud department confirmed that $23,000 had been transferred from my account to a business owned by Robert. The transfer had been authorized using a scanned power of attorney. Marcus compared the signature to the guardianship documents. The same notary had witnessed both. The notary was one of Robert's cousins. We finally had the structure of the scheme, but we still needed proof of the poisoning. And we needed to protect the children before Chloe realized how much we knew. My mother organized a small family gathering that afternoon. Officially, it was meant to calm everyone down before the hearing. In reality, Marcus and the detective investigating the forged documents wanted Chloe talking. I wore a small recorder clipped beneath the collar of my blouse. My state allowed one-party consent recordings. I arrived early. Chloe came without the children. Robert stayed outside in his truck. She walked into my mother's dining room carrying another folder. "You look better," she said. "You sound disappointed," she smiled. "That attitude is exactly why the court will choose me. Where are my children?" "Safe. With Robert," her expression flickered. "Only for a second. I know you married him." The room became completely still. My mother looked from Chloe to me. "You married Robert?" Chloe ignored her. "You've been digging?" "I also know about the trust." Her face hardened. "The children's money needs responsible management. You drained my bank account. I protected the funds from someone who nearly killed herself. I didn't poison myself." Chloe leaned closer. "You should be careful what you accuse people of." "Did you put cashew oil in the pasta?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You always were dramatic. I trusted you. That was your mistake." I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "Give me my children, and I won't tell the police what happened." Chloe studied me. She wanted to know how much evidence I had, so she reached into her folder and placed a laboratory report on the table. It claimed that opioid medication had been found in my blood the night I was admitted. "I'll submit this to Child Protective Services tomorrow," she said. "The court won't return the children to a drug addict. I've never taken opioids." The report says otherwise. "It's fake. Can you prove that before the hearing?" I said nothing. Chloe mistook my silence for fear. She moved closer and lowered her voice. "This can end quietly. Sign the parental consent forms. I keep the children. You avoid criminal charges and public humiliation. What happens to the trust? I manage it." With Robert, her mouth curved. "Robert understands money better than you. He lost his rights because he abandoned them. He made one mistake. He made dozens. And you had one plate of pasta." I looked directly at her. "You knew what was in it," she shrugged. "I knew you should have been more careful. You could have killed me. But I didn't." The words hung between us. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain the recorder had captured it. Chloe continued. "The dosage was supposed to make you sick. Robert said the ambulance would get there in time. We only needed you unconscious long enough to file the emergency petition." My mother made a choking sound. Chloe turned towards her. That was when she remembered we weren't alone. Her face changed. I reached beneath my collar and removed the recorder. "You're right," I said. "I should have been more careful about who I trusted." She lunged towards me. My mother stepped between us. Chloe backed away, grabbed her folder, and ran outside. Robert's truck was gone before I reached the window. The recording did not immediately solve everything. Real life rarely works that cleanly. The detective needed to verify it. The prosecutor needed to review it. The hospital needed to confirm the toxicology report was fraudulent, but Chloe had given us enough. By that evening, investigators had obtained the authentic hospital laboratory results. There were no opioids in my blood, only medications administered by emergency personnel. The fake report used the name of a laboratory that had closed 3 years earlier. Police also recovered messages between Chloe, Robert, and the notary. One message from Robert read, "Once the guardianship is permanent, we move the trust money before she can appeal." Another from Chloe said, "Make sure the food container disappears." Warrants were approved early the next morning, but the police waited. They knew Chloe and Robert intended to appear at the custody hearing. They wanted the children secured first. I entered the courtroom wearing the same cardigan Chloe had worn when she locked me out of my own house. My mother had recovered it from a box Chloe left in the garage. It wasn't important. But it reminded me that Chloe had believed everything I owned was already hers. Bobby and Sasha were brought into a separate waiting room with a court-appointed advocate. I wasn't allowed to see them before the hearing. That was the hardest part. Chloe sat beside her lawyer. Robert sat in the row behind her. Neither of them looked worried. The judge began by reviewing my medical condition. My doctor testified that the coma resulted from a life-threatening allergic reaction. He confirmed I was mentally competent and medically capable of caring for my children. Then Marcus introduced the authentic laboratory results. Chloe's lawyer objected. The judge overruled him. Marcus presented the fraudulent power of attorney, the bank transfers, and the notary's connection to Robert. Then he produced the marriage certificate. The judge looked at Chloe. "You failed to disclose that you are married to the children's biological father." Chloe's lawyer turned towards her sharply. Apparently, she had failed to tell him too. Finally, Marcus played the recording. The courtroom remained silent as Chloe's voice filled the room. "The dosage was supposed to make you sick. We only needed you unconscious long enough to file the emergency petition." Chloe stopped moving. Robert stood. A bailiff immediately ordered him to sit down. When the recording ended, the judge removed his glasses. His voice was calm. That made it more powerful. "The emergency guardianship is vacated effective immediately." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in 6 days. Full legal and physical custody is restored to Stephanie Peterson. Chloe Michaels is prohibited from contacting the children pending further order of this court. All authority over the children's financial trusts is returned to their mother. Chloe began speaking rapidly. She claimed the recording was manipulated. She claimed I had threatened her. She claimed Robert had planned everything. Robert shouted that Chloe was lying. The bailiff moved between them. Then 2 detectives entered through the rear doors. Chloe was arrested on charges related to poisoning, forgery, fraud, and custodial interference. Robert was arrested for conspiracy, financial fraud, and his role in preparing the false documents. The notary was arrested later that afternoon. I didn't smile when they were led away. I thought I would. For 2 days, I had imagined that moment, but when it happened, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. They had treated my children as keys to a bank account. They had gambled with my life. And they had expected Bobby and Sasha to carry the damage long after the money was gone. A court officer brought my children into the hallway. Sasha saw me first. She ran so quickly that one of her shoes came off. Bobby followed, trying to appear brave until he reached me. Then he wrapped both arms around my waist and began crying. "Were you really sick?" he asked. "Yes. Aunt Chloe said you didn't want us anymore." I knelt despite the pain in my chest. "I will always want you." Sasha touched the hospital band still around my wrist. "Are you coming home?" "Yes." "Is Aunt Chloe coming?" "No," she considered that. Then she whispered, "Good." The criminal cases took nearly a year. Chloe eventually accepted a plea agreement after investigators found searches on her laptop about allergic reaction response times, emergency guardianship laws, and methods for accessing children's trusts. Robert pleaded guilty after Chloe's attorney tried to place most of the blame on him. The money taken from my savings was recovered from an account he had opened under a business name. The children's trust was never touched. They had come within 1 court order of controlling it, but close was not enough. I sold the house 3 months later, not because Chloe had won. Because Bobby couldn't sleep in his room after learning she had stayed there while I was unconscious. We moved to a smaller house with a bright kitchen, a fenced garden, and locks chosen by Bobby. Sasha planted sunflowers beside the back steps. I changed jobs too, not because I had to. Because nearly dying taught me that security and familiarity are not the same thing. Sometimes familiarity is simply danger you have learned not to question. People ask whether I miss my sister. The honest answer is complicated. I miss the sister I believed I had. The woman who brought soup when my children were sick. The aunt who remembered birthdays. The person I trusted with a spare key. But I eventually understood that those moments had not meant to Chloe what they meant to me. To me, they were proof of love. To her, they were investments. Each favor gave her access. Each secret gave her leverage. Each act of kindness made it less likely that I would recognize the threat standing inside my own home. Chloe believed that taking my children would break me. Instead, it removed the last illusion protecting her. She thought 6 days of silence gave her enough time to steal my life, but all she really did was leave a trail. A forged signature, a hidden marriage, a bank transfer, a false laboratory report, and one recorded confession she never imagined I would be calm enough to capture. That was the part she never understood about me. I didn't need to scream louder than she did. I only needed to let her keep talking.